America.
Steve McQueen is Tom Horn, who became a legend.
James Garner is here for more than 50 years. He has remained one of America's most recognizable and respected actors. He began his career in 1954.
Oh, McQueen. Crazy McQueen. McQueen and I got along pretty good. McQueen looked at me kind of like an older brother. And he didn't want to have much to do with me till he got in trouble, then he'd call.
James Garner Revealed. The 7 actors he hated the most. James Garner was Hollywood's golden boy, the charming rogue who made Maverick a household name and turned the Rockford Files into television gold. With his easy smile and natural charisma, Garner seemed like the kind of guy who could get along with anyone. He was known throughout Hollywood as a professional, a gentleman, and someone who brought levity to even the most stressful film sets. But behind that famous grin and those twinkling eyes lay a side of James Garner that few ever saw. A side that harbored deep grudges, professional resentments, and genuine hatred for some of his fellow actors. These weren't just minor disagreements or creative differences. These were personal vendettas that lasted decades and shaped the very trajectory of his career. What could make America's sweetheart despise his colleagues so intensely? What happened behind the camera that was so devastating it turned friendship into fury? Today, we're pulling back the curtain on Hollywood's darkest secrets to reveal the 7 actors that James Garner truly, deeply hated. Some of these names will shock you. Others will make perfect sense once you hear the full story. But all of them reveal a truth about Hollywood that the studios never wanted you to know. That even the most beloved stars have their breaking points, and when pushed too far, even James Garner could hold a grudge that would last a lifetime. The first name on this list involves a rivalry so intense it nearly destroyed both their careers. Steve McQueen, the king of cool's uncool behavior. Steve McQueen, the king of cool himself. With his piercing blue eyes and rebellious swagger, McQueen dominated the screen in classics like Bullitt, The Great Escape, and The Magnificent Seven. He was the anti-hero America fell in love with, the motorcycle-riding, race-car driving embodiment of 1960s masculine cool. But Steve McQueen's cool persona was just that, a persona. Behind the cameras, McQueen was notorious for his explosive temper, his massive ego, and his pathological need to be the center of attention on every single project he touched. And nowhere was this more evident than during his work with James Garner on The Great Escape in 1963. From the moment they met on set, sparks flew, and not in a good way. Garner, with his natural professionalism and team player attitude, immediately clashed with McQueen's prima donna behavior. McQueen demanded top billing, the best trailers, and refused to shoot scenes where he wasn't the clear focus. He would deliberately flub his lines when other actors had powerful moments, forcing multiple retakes that shifted attention back to him. But the breaking point came during the famous motorcycle chase sequence. McQueen, obsessed with doing his own stunts, began taking increasingly dangerous risks that put the entire cast and crew in jeopardy. When Garner tried to intervene, suggesting they use professional stunt doubles for the sake of everyone's safety, McQueen exploded. "You stick to your pretty boy acting, Garner," McQueen reportedly snarled. "Some of us are actually tough enough to do the real work." The insult cut deep. Garner, a decorated Korean War veteran who had seen real combat, was being lectured about toughness by a Hollywood actor who played tough guys on screen. The irony wasn't lost on anyone present that day. But what happened next sealed their animosity forever. During one particularly dangerous stunt, McQueen's recklessness caused a near-fatal accident that hospitalized 2 crew members. Instead of showing remorse, McQueen blamed the crew for not being professional enough to handle a real actor's commitment to authenticity. Garner was disgusted. From that moment forward, he refused to speak to McQueen unless absolutely necessary for their scenes together. The tension was so thick that director John Sturges had to schedule their filming days separately whenever possible. Years later, Garner would describe McQueen as the most selfish actor I ever worked with, a man who would sacrifice anyone and anything for his own image. The hatred was mutual. McQueen, threatened by Garner's natural likability and effortless screen presence, spent years bad-mouthing Garner to industry insiders, calling him soft and overrated. Their feud would simmer for decades, with both actors going out of their way to avoid projects that might force them to work together again. But Steve McQueen was just the beginning of Garner's list of Hollywood enemies. Rock Hudson, the perfect leading man's imperfect methods. Rock Hudson was everything Hollywood wanted in a leading man. Standing 6'4" with rugged good looks and a commanding screen presence, Hudson dominated romantic dramas and comedies throughout the 1950s and 60s. Films like Giant, Pillow Talk, and All That Heaven Allows made him one of the most bankable stars in Hollywood history. But Hudson's perfection on screen came at a cost that few of his co-stars were willing to pay, especially James Garner. Their first collaboration should have been a dream pairing. Two of Hollywood's most charming leading men working together on what was supposed to be a light romantic comedy. Instead, it became a nightmare of clashing philosophies that would poison their professional relationship forever. The problem wasn't personal animosity. It was Hudson's obsessive approach to his craft. While Garner believed in spontaneity and natural performances, Hudson was a methodical perfectionist who demanded take after take after take until every gesture, every inflection, every micro-expression was exactly as he envisioned it. Rock would want to do 30 takes of ordering coffee, Garner later recalled with barely concealed frustration. 30 takes for ordering coffee. Meanwhile, the rest of us are losing our minds trying to maintain energy and authenticity in scene 67 of the same 3 lines. But it wasn't just the endless retakes that drove Garner to distraction. Hudson had developed a habit of completely changing his performance between rehearsals and actual filming, leaving his co-stars scrambling to adjust their own performances on the fly. What seemed like a romantic comedy scene during rehearsal might suddenly become an intense dramatic moment when the cameras rolled, with no warning to anyone else involved. The breaking point came during a pivotal romantic scene. They had rehearsed it dozens of times, with Garner carefully calibrating his performance to match Hudson's approach. But when they started filming, Hudson completely altered his interpretation, turning what was supposed to be a tender moment into something bordering on melodrama. Garner snapped, "Rock, we've been working on this scene for 3 weeks. You can't just change everything now and expect everyone else to be mind readers." Hudson's response was ice cold. "Some actors can adapt, James. The truly professional ones, anyway." The insult hit harder because it came from someone Garner had initially respected. Hudson wasn't just criticizing his acting. He was questioning his professionalism, his adaptability, his very worth as a performer. From that moment forward, their scenes together became exercises in barely contained mutual contempt. Hudson would continue his perfectionist approach, but now with a passive-aggressive edge that seemed designed to make Garner look unprepared. Meanwhile, Garner found himself second-guessing every choice, every reaction, knowing that Hudson might completely change direction without warning. The film was completed, but the damage was permanent. Garner would later describe working with Hudson as like trying to dance with someone who keeps changing the music mid-song. For his part, Hudson reportedly told friends that Garner was too rigid and couldn't handle real acting. Their mutual dislike became Hollywood legend, with both actors ensuring they would never share a project again. But Rock Hudson's methodical madness was mild compared to the next actor on Garner's hate list. James Garner, with his natural humor and easygoing charm, represented everything that Bronson despised about modern Hollywood. Their first meeting should have been a meeting of mutual respect. Both were seasoned professionals, both had served their country in wartime, and both had earned their stripes in the unforgiving world of Hollywood westerns. Instead, it became a clash of personalities so fundamental that it seemed inevitable from the first handshake. The trouble began immediately during their first table read together. Garner, true to his nature, tried to lighten the mood with some gentle humor about the script's more melodramatic moments. It was the kind of behind-the-scenes camaraderie that usually helped actors bond and find their rhythm together. Bronson's response was a stare so cold it could have frozen hell itself. "Some of us take our work seriously," he growled, his voice barely above a whisper, but carrying the weight of a thunderclap. Garner was stunned. He had dealt with difficult actors before, but never someone who seemed personally offended by the mere concept of levity. But he tried to push forward, attempting to find common ground with this intimidating co-star. That common ground never materialized. Bronson interpreted every one of Garner's attempts at friendship as weakness, every joke as unprofessionalism, and every smile as evidence that Garner wasn't truly committed to the craft. Meanwhile, Garner found himself increasingly frustrated by Bronson's refusal to engage with anyone on set as a human being rather than a method-acting exercise. The breaking point came during a particularly challenging action sequence. A stunt had gone wrong, leaving one of the crew members shaken but uninjured. Garner immediately rushed over to check on the man, cracking a gentle joke to help ease the tension and get everyone back into the right headspace. Bronson exploded. This isn't a gun. Bronson's response was to turn his back on Garner and walk away without another word. For the remainder of the shoot, he refused to speak directly to Garner unless absolutely required for their scenes together. Even then, his interactions were limited to the bare minimum necessary to complete their work. The hostility was so palpable that other actors began choosing sides, creating factions on set that made every day a minefield of interpersonal drama. Garner later described the experience as like working with a statue that occasionally moved and always disapproved. Years later, when asked about Charles Bronson in interviews, Garner's usual diplomatic nature would completely disappear. "Some actors are difficult," he would say. Charles was impossible. He seemed to think that being miserable was a requirement for being talented. But if Garner thought Bronson was difficult to work with, he had no idea what was coming next. Yves Montand, Lost in Translation and Ego. Yves Montand was European sophistication personified. The French actor and singer had conquered European cinema with his magnetic presence and continental charm, starring in classics like The Wages of Fear and Z. When Hollywood came calling in the 1960s, Montand seemed like the perfect addition to American cinema, a worldly, cultured performer who could bring international flair to any project. What Hollywood didn't anticipate was how Montand's European sensibilities would clash catastrophically with American filmmaking methods, particularly when paired with an actor like James Garner, who embodied everything Montand found crude about American entertainment. Their collaboration began with high hopes. The studio executives envisioned a sophisticated international production that would showcase both Montand's European elegance and Garner's American charm. On paper, it seemed like a perfect combination. The worldly Frenchman and the charismatic American, representing the best of both cinematic traditions. Reality proved far different. From their very first meeting, Montand made it clear that he considered American filmmaking to be beneath the artistic standards he was accustomed to in European cinema. He arrived on set with an entourage of assistants, a personal chef, and a translator, despite speaking perfectly fluent English, as if he were visiting a foreign country rather than working on a collaborative project. But it was Montand's attitude toward his fellow actors that truly poisoned the atmosphere. He treated Garner not as a peer, but as a representative of what he saw as America's shallow, commercially driven approach to cinema. Every suggestion Garner made about their scenes together was met with condescending dismissal. "In Europe, we understand that cinema is art," Montand would say, his accent making even his insults sound sophisticated. "Perhaps in America, you are more concerned with, how do you say, selling popcorn?" Garner initially tried to bridge the cultural gap with his characteristic humor and professionalism. He made genuine efforts to understand Montand's perspective, even going so far as to study some of the Frenchman's earlier work to better appreciate his artistic approach. These olive branches were not only rejected, but twisted into further evidence of American inadequacy. When Garner complimented Montand's performance in The Wages of Fear, the French actor replied, "Of course you would enjoy the action sequences. Very American of you to miss the philosophical subtext." The breaking point came during a crucial dramatic scene that required both actors to portray complex emotions while maintaining the story's momentum. Garner had prepared extensively, working with the director to understand the scene's place in the larger narrative. He delivered what everyone present considered a powerful, nuanced performance. Montand's response was devastating. This is exactly why European cinema is superior. You perform with your muscles, not your soul. The insult was particularly cruel because it attacked not just Garner's performance, but his entire approach to acting. Worse, it came in front of the entire cast and crew, humiliating Garner in a way that cut deeper than any personal attack. Garner's response was immediate and furious. "You know what, Yves? Maybe the problem isn't that American actors don't have souls. Maybe the problem is that some European actors are so far up their own asses that they can't recognize talent when it's standing right in front of them." The set fell silent. Nobody had ever seen Garner lose his temper so completely, and certainly not in such a public way. Montand, for his part, seemed almost pleased to have provoked such a reaction, as if it confirmed everything he believed about American lack of sophistication. The remainder of the production was completed in an atmosphere of barely controlled hostility. Montand continued his condescending behavior, while Garner retreated into a cold professionalism that was completely at odds with his usual warm nature. Their scenes together crackled with real tension, which ironically made for compelling cinema, but created a working environment that everyone involved remembered as nightmarish. The film was completed, but the damage extended far beyond that single project. Garner's experience with Montand left him deeply suspicious of international co-productions and European actors in general. "Some people confuse arrogance with artistry," he would later say. Yves Montand was living proof of that confusion. But international tensions were nothing compared to the domestic battles that lay ahead on Garner's list.